There lived in Verona 2 great families, named Montague and Capulet. There was an old quarrel between the 2 families. A Montague wouldn't speak to a Capulet if he met one in the street, nor a Capulet to a Montague. Once, Lord Capulet gave a party. He was so hospitable that he said anyone might come to it, except the Montagues. But a young Montague, named Romeo, wanted very much to be there, because Rosaline, the lady he loved, had been asked. So he went to the Capulet's grand party with his friends Mercutio and Benvolio. Presently, amid the dancers, Romeo saw Juliet. She was very beautiful. From that moment, Romeo never again gave one thought to Rosaline. All the world seemed vain and worthless to him compared with her. Tybalt, Lady Capulet's nephew, heard him. He knew him to be Romeo. Tybalt went at once to his uncle. He told him how a Montague had come uninvited to the feast. But old Capulet bade Tybalt be quiet. In the meantime, Romeo told Juliet in sweet words that he loved her. Just then her mother sent for her. Romeo found out that she was the daughter of Lord Capulet. So he went away sorrowing indeed, but loving her. Juliet said to her nurse, "Who is that gentleman that would not dance?" "His name is Romeo and a Montague. He is the only son of your great enemy," answered the nurse. Juliet went to her room. She looked out of her window. Romeo was hidden in the garden among the trees. So she, not knowing him to be there, spoke her secret thought aloud. Juliet told the quiet garden how she loved Romeo. Romeo heard and was glad beyond measure. "Ah, why are you called Romeo?" said Juliet. "Since I love you, what does it matter what you are called? Call me but love, and I'll be new baptized. Henceforth I never will be Romeo," he cried, stepping into the full white moonlight. And they spoke long together with the sweetest words. When the time came to part, it seemed as though they had met but that moment. "I will send for you tomorrow," said Juliet. The next morning, very early, Romeo went to Friar Lawrence, a priest. He told him all the story. He begged him to marry him to Juliet without delay. After some talk, the priest consented to do. Juliet sent her old nurse to Romeo that day. She wanted to know what he purposed to do. The old woman took back a message that all was well, and all things were ready for the marriage of Juliet and Romeo on the next morning. The young lovers were afraid to ask their parents' consent to their marriage. Friar Lawrence was willing to help the young lovers secretly. He thought that the match might put a happy end to the old quarrel. So the next morning, Romeo and Juliet were married at Friar Lawrence's cell. Romeo promised to come into the garden that evening. The nurse got ready a rope ladder to let down from the window, so that Romeo could climb up and talk to his dear wife quietly and alone. But that very day a dreadful thing happened. Tybalt met Romeo and his 2 friends, Mercutio and Benvolio, in the street. He called Romeo a villain and asked him to fight. Romeo had no wish to fight with Juliet's cousin, but Mercutio drew his sword. Mercutio and Tybalt fought. Mercutio was killed. Romeo saw that his friend was dead. He forgot everything except anger at the man who had killed him. He and Tybalt fought till Tybalt fell dead. Poor Juliet and her young husband met that night. But their meeting was a sad one. They parted with bitter tears, because they could not know when they should meet again. Romeo went to Mantua. Juliet's father wished her to wed a gentleman named Paris. Juliet hurried away to ask Friar Lawrence what she should do. He advised her to pretend to consent, and then he said, "I will give you a draught that will make you seem to be dead for 2 days. They will put you in the vault, thinking you are dead. Before you wake up, Romeo and I will be there to take care of you. Will you do this, or are you afraid?" "I will do it. Talk not to me of fear," said Juliet. She went home and told her father she would marry Paris. Early in the morning, the nurse came to call Juliet, but she would not wake. At last the nurse cried out suddenly, "Alas! Help! My lady's dead!" Lady Capulet came running in, and then Lord Capulet, and Lord Paris, the bridegroom. There lay Juliet, cold and white and lifeless. All their weeping could not wake her. Meantime, Friar Lawrence had sent a messenger to Mantua, with a letter to Romeo telling him of all these things. But the messenger was delayed. He could not go. But ill news travels fast. Romeo's servant heard of her funeral. He hurried to Mantua to tell Romeo how his young wife was dead and lying in the grave. "Is it so?" cried Romeo, heartbroken. "Then I will lie by Juliet's side tonight." He bought himself a poison. He went straight back to Verona. He hastened to the tomb where Juliet was lying. He broke open the door. Suddenly, he heard a voice behind him calling on him to stop. It was the Count Paris. "How dare you come here and disturb the dead bodies of the Capulets?" cried Paris. Poor Romeo, half mad with sorrow, yet tried to answer gently. "You were told," said Paris, "that if you return to Verona, you must die." "I must indeed," said Romeo. "I came here for nothing else. Good, gentle youth, leave me. Oh, go before I do you any harm." Then Paris said, "I defy you, and I arrest you as a felon." Romeo, in his anger and despair, drew his sword. They fought, and Paris was killed. Romeo carried the dead man into the tomb. He laid him by Juliet's side. Then he kneeled by Juliet and spoke to her. He held her in his arms. He kissed her cold lips, believing that she was dead. Then he drank the poison. He died beside his sweetheart and wife. The poor Juliet woke out of her sleep to find her husband and her friend both dead beside her. Juliet saw the cup that had held the poison, and since no poison was left for her, she drew her Romeo's dagger and thrust it through her heart. And so, falling with her head on her Romeo's breast, she died. And here ends the story of these faithful and most unhappy lovers. Capulets and Montagues saw all the mischief their wicked quarrel had wrought. They repented of it. Over the bodies of their dead children, they clasped hands at last in friendship and forgiveness.